My name is Dallas Goldtooth. I'm with the Indigenous Environmental Network.
And what are you doing here in Cancun?
The Indigenous Environmental Network kind of brought me down to help with the media team. My aspect was more technical side. I helped do the website, upload content. I helped coordinate a lot of our media coverage, as well as a co-host of the daily live show that we did streaming online on redroadcancun.com, the website. So.
Hold on a second, I'm gonna hide your mic a little better.
Okay.
It's just too obvious.
Yeah. We can do it over again, too.
No, that's cool. Good. And why have you and the IEN come to Cancun?
Well, a lot of the decisions that are being made here and that were being made here in Cancun, because the agreements have come out, the decisions being made here affect a lot of the communities that we work for. That it affects my community. That I come affects a lot of my brothers and sisters throughout Indian country, Native American communities up in North America. But not only that, but just indigenous peoples worldwide. A lot of our people are on the front lines of the destructive policies that are promoted by our nation state throughout the world, but also major or transnational corporations. So, the main reason is being here is making sure that our voices are being heard in these negotiations, that we're not just left out on the side, that our stories and how the agreements here and whatever may come out of here is going to affect us more so than anyone else in the industrialized world or the developed countries.
What if you could give us a bit of the indigenous relationship with the land and with the natural world?
Well, I guess first, Damakota. I'm Dakota. I'm a Dakota Wicohan. I'm a Dakota man coming from Dakota Territory in the Upper Great Plains, and we have, in our way, and I can't really speak for all indigenous people. I don't think anyone can really take that step to speak on behalf of everybody. But now I can speak on my own tribe and for my own people. There's a word that we have is Dakota Wicohan, and which kind of means a Dakota life, a Dakota way of life, a Dakota philosophy of sorts. And that's very rooted in a relationship with Mother Earth and acknowledging the sacredness of Mother Earth. We understand that our life, our history, our language, every aspect of who we are is influenced by our surroundings, by our environment, by the Mother Earth and the things that are around us, the lakes, the rivers, the air. It makes us Dakota. Without the land, we are not Dakota, and that's one of the foundations of who we are. Our ceremonies were created and are meant to occur in Dakota territory. That's just the way it goes. And if you alter the land, it alters who we are as a people because of that.
And what's happening to the land?
What's happening to the land? Well, there are many things happening to our territory and many other territories out in Indian country. Whether you can, there's a whole range of issues. any environmental destructive issue that you have, it's happening on indigenous lands somewhere. Whether it's mining, whether it's open pit mining, whether it's pipelines, whether it's the tar sands project up north, whether it's uranium mining, any nuclear reactors, the whole nuclear issues, the storage of nuclear waste is happening on indigenous lands. For my people, there's the XL pipeline that's coming through, that has gone through our territories already. In one of my communities back home, there's a nuclear reactor that's already on the territory that's 2 miles from the community there. So those are some of the environmental. Those are some of the things that are occurring back home that are really that are an issue for us, because again, like I said, it's affecting. It's what happens to the land happens to us.
In terms of problems environmentally, like what would you say are is the biggest environmental problem out there right now?
I mean, on a global scale or within a localized area, or how would you say?
Global. Give me global, and then give me one that. Give me both.
I think global scale, I think there's definitely, and I think one of the messages that IEN and a lot of indigenous organizations and groups wanted to bring here is that you can't separate environmental policy from economic policy. And I think that's a truth. The reality, that's kind of common sense, but I think that's kind of being left out of the discussions in the greater, people are leaving that out, out of the greater discussions as far as what happened here. There has to be an acknowledgement from the greater developing countries of the world of the debt, the ecological debt they're placing upon the world, and I think on a global scale, that's the biggest problem, is you have the developed countries of the world that because of their policies and their needs and their economic needs, they're dumping this crap on the rest of the world, and whether that's in the global south and localized communities, not just indigenous communities, but poor communities throughout the world, but also even within, the countries themselves, the reservations inside in the United States, the reserves the First Nations reserves up in Canada. So I think that's the biggest threat is the policies of the greater nations, I feel.
Yeah. If there was one change you'd like to see in environmental policy or for protection of land around the world, what kind of thing would it look like?
I think a huge step for the future of the world on a more, I guess, a political international level is the acknowledgement of the indigenous peoples, acknowledgement of the Declaration of Indigenous Peoples' Rights within the United Nations, and a full acknowledgement of the Cochabamba Accords with any future climate change negotiations. I mean, there's countless hours and days have been spent creating those documents to hold the world and the developed nations of the world accountable for what they're doing. I think that's not going to solve all our problems. That's not going to solve all of it, but I think that's going to be a huge step of trying to hold nations accountable for their policies.
What can you give me a sort of that piece of policy for dummies, the Indigenous Peoples' Rights for Dummies from the UN? What does it say?
Well, I think the main focus of the Cochabamba Accord is the one main one is, I gotta remember the wording, because again, it's like my mind has been jammed full of acronyms and knowledge and things like that. But one of the main principles is the right to free, informed, and prior consent. That communities need to have prior knowledge of what's going to happen. Free to make their decision, and have an informed, the knowledge of what's going on in their communities. So, I guess I'm going to start over. Is the principle is acknowledging that indigenous peoples have had a long-standing relationship with Mother Earth. They have a deeply rooted and connected relationship that is based on the sacredness of Mother Earth. And I think that's the main foundation, is that we have to acknowledge as a people, as a world, the sacredness of Mother Earth. Two is that as indigenous peoples, because we've lived basically on the earth for thousands of years, and we've developed localized methods to live in balance with everything, that we need to acknowledge that and understand that some of those methods and practices need to be acknowledged and highlighted, but not at the same time not co-opted or commercialized, and there always has to be acknowledgement that indigenous peoples are the first peoples from that land, wherever it may be. That's my understanding of it. Is the bigger picture is that we need to reconnect with what it means to have, or we need to reconnect with the sacredness of Mother Earth. I think that's the primary understanding. I know it's a very grand idea. It's really not. It's really hard for people to understand it because there's no solid ties to it. You can't really. How do you put that into practice? And that's how I feel. That's like what I got out of. Really get out of it. Other specific stuff about the Cochabamba is the no reds, rejecting any false solutions that are promoted by by whether it's a corporation or a nation. Understand that knowledge for hundreds and hundreds of years, knowledge and practices have been co-opted from indigenous peoples, and we need to correct that balance.
What could the developed world, what could the capitalistic world learn from indigenous peoples or your indigenous peoples that would help them shift towards living in balance?
I think I don't know. Well, I'm just thinking about the wording of that. I'm thinking about I'm reflecting on our own wording of things. Is for me personally, I feel it's
You don't need to worry about how you word it. You can just
I'm just thinking. It's kind of a contradictory. I feel like what I'm thinking is kind of contradictory, because our job is not to help. My job our job as indigenous people isn't to be like, oh, we're here to help you understand this. Basically we're trying to say is what you're doing is messed up, and what you're doing is killing the earth. And we have been doing this for so many years, for thousands of years. We have been living as best as we can in balance. We have hiccups here and there, but we try our best, and we've been doing it. And you're not. We don't have the answer for you, because that's really something that has to come from within you. Because if we're not going to hold your hand and be like, oh, we're going to be your little Indian guide here and show you how to correct the world, because that's something that you have developed internally. And I think that's the whole idea of decolonization. That big word that we promote out there is that even the industrialized world and the people that are part of the mainstream of the world society need to understand is that there has to be a process of decolonization that has to come from within internally, because it's just we don't have the energy to basically deal with our problems and trying to heal our own communities and be with work with our own communities at the same time trying to give a roadmap to how the mainstream world and the big top names of the world can fix their own problems. We're not the mothers of the world. We're here to voice our opinion and say, we don't know how you can fix your problems, but you need to fix your problems. And we have some ideas about it. There's some solutions here that we feel, but with anything that's from an indigenous perspective, it has to be localized. You have to understand that you can't just take this strategy or this method and place it all over the world. That each nation has to develop their own understanding of what it means to be respectful and acknowledge that the Mother Earth is sacred. And the communities that the indigenous nations that are within those nations, or the indigenous peoples within the United States, Canada, Australia, Japan. Even there are indigenous peoples in Japan. They have the localized idea of what it means for them, and that these big ass nations can get something from that. But I don't know. So I feel like it's always hard, because we're saying acknowledge our rights, acknowledge, and we have the answers, and that's the big thing we hear here, right? Indigenous people saying we know the answer, what it means to, we know how to correct climate change and make it come back into balance. We say that, but at the same time, I feel like we're not your babysitter. Our job isn't to really hold your hand and guide you through this, because we have our own. We're still dealing and processing the crap that basically you put on us. So we're dealing with that crap. You got to figure out for your own, but we can help you. You know what I mean? So it's like that. How do you work that out? Those messages, we have the answer, but at the same time, we're not your babysitter.
Yeah.
And I think that's a dialogue that we as indigenous organizers and leaders need to have, but at the same time, other folks that aren't indigenous need to also have, because it gets really close into the whole commodification of our spirituality, which is a really hot a touchy subject for indigenous peoples, because then folks start commodifying our culture, and then we get all upset over that. So it's like there's definitely a balance that needs to be struck.
Are there some? I feel like there's some tools though. There's some hints you guys can be like, look, you need to keep the natural world alive. You need to.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like, there are tools and methods that can be looked at, but I guess the message is that we have the answers, or, well, no. The message, more or less, that we put out, that, like, we'd like to put out there is that, you know, we've been doing this for thousands of years, and we have a systems that are set up that allow us to live in somewhat of a balance with Mother Earth. And here, take a look at them. Look at what we're doing and try to use some of these as tools to help you. But don't jack our ceremonies. Don't jack our culture, you know. But there's pretty blanket rules that a lot of indigenous peoples carry. And it's up to you as a nation, or up to you as a culture or a society, to find out in your own terms what that means. Find in your own terms what it means to have a sacred relationship to Mother Earth. You know, and the policies that are out there now are definitely totally the antithesis of all that. You know, the hot topic is red. You know, obviously that goes absolutely against any acknowledgement of Mother Earth and what it means to have Mother Earth. You know, so yeah, I don't know if that answered your question, but it's just like that's how I feel is like about it.
Yeah, something in your right nostril you might want to wipe away.
Huh? Is it my nose hair?
Gone. Good. Some of those rules that like indigenous peoples have, could you give us a couple of them? Like,
I guess, yeah. Well, I mean, there's no book anywhere that says indigenous rules, but I think from my own experience, there is a common trait. You know, it's cliche, but the idea that, you know, you don't take any more than you need. You know, I mean, that's a very basic common sense teaching that even in America you hear people talk about, you know, but do we ever really put that into practice, the idea of consumption? You know, I think, you know, that's a founding idea, and for my own people and many other indigenous folks, is you don't take any more than what you need, and what you do take, there has to be some form of reciprocity. You know, an acknowledgement that you are taking something, you know, and you see that everywhere. You know, it's not, you know, most people in the world just think, oh, all that matters is if I take from somebody else. That's the only thing that matters. If I take a property of yours, that's what matters, and I have to obviously give some form of reciprocity, or else I'm jacking you for whatever you have. But from an indigenous philosophy and perspective, is that the rights that you have they're also rights for the land. They're also rights of Mother Earth, and there has to be some form of reciprocity and giving back for that. And you know, that's whether that's through prayers or ceremony, whether that's through every community comes up with their own method of how that reciprocity happens, but that they acknowledge that there's an acknowledgement, a full acknowledgement of that, you know, all these things, not just human beings, but all aspects of life have rights, and they have to be respected. So it's just common, you know, being respectful of that.
Where do you find hope in the struggle?
Personally, I find hope in my ceremonies, in my stuff that are, well, let me think. I find hope that a lot of Native people are coming back and redefining and finding out what it means to be Dakota or Dene. You know, that word again, decolonization. I find hope that within the United States, because that's where I can speak from, that there's a whole movement of people in their own way reconnecting to Mother Earth. That they're letting go and rejecting the hegemony that's been placed upon us as people, the philosophy, the ideas of an outsider from an outside world. I just find hope that our songs are coming back, you know, our ceremonies are coming back, especially in light of where the trajectory that the Earth is going and the path of destruction that we're heading towards. I find hope that in the face of that, there's a rejuvenation of our songs, and there's a rejuvenation of our cultural ways within, you know, people in the United States, in Canada, and I see it throughout the world. And whatever may come down the road, you know, it may be bad, it may be good, but personally, I find hope that we at least have our songs and language, and that our songs are going to help us get to that point, and it'll help us get through that, whatever hardship is coming. You know, we have in our people, you know, we have a, what's it called? It's a huge word, Nostradamus, it's a prediction, prophecy, you know. Why did that word escape me? I find hope in the fact that we have prophecies about the path of destruction of the earth. We have prophecies that foresee a time when our people and the people are going to suffer, that, you know, the world's going to get hotter, that food will be more scarce, and that, you know, people are going to die. But within that prophecy, there is also said that those that stick to their culture, those that learn the songs, and those that practice the old ways and our old practices are the ones that are going to be able to get through those moments. And so with that in mind, I'm seeing all these people, like my peers, everyone are bringing back our ways, and the songs are coming back. And so I'm like, you know, no matter what may come, I know that we can push through this because we have this deeply rooted knowledge that's older than anything else that's going to help us get through those moments, that moment of strife. You know, and then also in those prophecies on the other side is they said that we always have the chance to change it. It's a prophecy, but we always have the chance to at least try to change it the best we can. Some of the main messages that I would get out there, my personal feeling is that your apathy is killing indigenous peoples. Your apathy is contributing to the deaths of indigenous peoples' cultures, ways of life, communities, and not just indigenous peoples, but localized communities throughout the world. Your refusal to acknowledge your country's actions and to reject their actions and their policies is putting basically death on a plate in front of people around the world who are on the front lines of these energy policies, these economic policies. And you know, you have to hold not only your nation accountable, but you have to try to hold yourself accountable. And that's something even I have a hard time with, but I try my best to be acknowledged, you know? And that all these news bulletins about, you know, COP16 and the United Nations negotiations, and all these news bulletins about, like, you know, oil and oil extraction and energy extraction, all these things, people don't really understand that for the most part, a huge percentage of the people that are on the lands that resource is being extracted from are poor people, are indigenous people, are communities that live off the land. And that count is up into the millions. So there are millions of people that are being, you know, displaced. There are millions of people that are dying. There are being, you know, their way of life is being eradicated for these companies, for these, you know, policies. And so you have to acknowledge it and be accountable for that in some form, you know. I think that's, I guess, in a very simple way, I guess that biggest thing I would like to say out to folks.
That's awesome. Simple is the best.
Yeah.
I think that's wicked. Thank you.
Yeah. Is that it?
I think so. You wanna...
I had one question.
No.
Sometimes you talk about, you know, indigenous life and how the simple life will kind of prevail as a solution to this. But it's not really a simple life, is it? It's, I mean, in a sense, for us, for the, you call mainstream society or the developed world to then go back to this simple life is actually like a very complex thing to do. And even to live the simple life nowadays is increasingly complex.
Yeah.
How could you imagine, because we all, I think, are acknowledging that, you know, less is more, but like how do you acknowledge, or
how does that look?
Yeah, how does it look?
There was this story. I'm sure you read about this guy, this Indian guy in the Amazon jungle, who's I guess the last of his tribe. And I don't know if you heard about it. You should check it out. It made the rounds on the social media network up north. It's a little article about this native man. He's the last of his tribe, really, in the middle of the Amazon jungle, and the government of Brazil has been trying to contact him and be in contact with him for like over 10 years. But he's so elusive, and he lives in a protected reserve and down there. So he just moves around, and he's killed like 6 or 7 government officials who've all gone out there to try to communicate with him. Like he straight kills them, and like just like F off, leave me alone. And so like it made the social media networks up north. A lot of Indian people were passing around and it was all the same taglines like, "Stay strong, brother. Stay strong. Hold out as long as you can," And it was like, it was just this little interesting piece of knowledge. It's one of those few examples of the idea of going native or going back to the land and living the most simplest way of life. In reality, the only place there's only a handful of places you can really do that. That's free of the world or free of the modernized world. And it's only a few places. And just like that guy shows it, if you have to fight for that to keep it that way. You literally have to fight to keep it that way. So I guess this idea, I feel like the true idea that the whole romanticize about, just lose all technology and go back to land. The fact of the matter is we got 6 billion people on this planet. It's not a reality. It's really not, I don't think it's really possible for as an entire world. What the picture looks like down the road, the idea, if we put into practice indigenous methods, to be honest, there are going to have to be a lot of sacrifices. There's going to have to be it's going to put a lot of strife, a lot of hardship on people. On a very maternalistic level, people are going to be like, have to go without. But I think the basic principle is we can't go back. These structures are here. The buildings are here. These things are here. And some things we are going to have to let go. Some things we have to deconstruct. Some of the mechanisms, some things we don't need exactly. But what the future looks, I don't know. It's I don't know. It's kind of a dark answer. It would have to be a dark answer. I mean, the idea that to put into full practice the methods that we would like to promote and everything, people are going to have to die. I feel like they're not going to have to die, but people will die, because we're so dependent on a system that is exploitive of the natural resources on the earth that we've kind of overconsumed. We've overstepped our boundaries. We're taking more than what we can take. We're taking more than what it can give. And if there's a path that we can find where to benefit everybody, then obviously we want that. But I don't know. Like it's a toughie. I mean, that's the whole idea, right? Like, places are overpopulated. So what do you do? How do you deal with that? And that comes in a very ethical question. Is it moral to say, these people can die and all this stuff? That's, I don't want to get into it. And it's a tough answer. But from my community, we hear a lot. Where I come from, we always hear a lot of elders, people talk about we need to go back to our old ways. But the reality is we've become really dependent on the new ways. And that we can't go back, but what we can do is move forward the best as we can and take a very open and critical, we can move forward with a very open and critical perspective and look at what things of the new world can be adapted and work with the new for the future. But it has to be a very, very, very intellectual, critical thought about what needs to be carried forward. I don't know. This is you think about places where, you know, you have a large population, people where there's not much water and they have to use pumps and wells and things like that. Like, it's nice to have a modernized pump, you know, those things help and they save lives. But so I don't know. It's a tough answer. It's a tough question. And I agree. I don't think a lot of people have really talked about that because it's such a tough answer. Like, we can promote all these, we can put out all these messages, but the end idea of what it looks like down the road, there's so many variables that go into it. It's really kind of daunting. It's kind of scary to look at that. But I agree. I think it needs to be looked at.
We need to start thinking about it.
Yeah, we need to. And I think it goes back to the whole idea, or it goes back to what I said earlier. Me personally, I feel like I'm here at the UN. This is an international little thing here. There's people from all over the world here, and we're talking about on a global scale. But my focus is on my people, and my focus is on the indigenous peoples in my area. Those are my brothers and sisters. And so, you know, there isn't going to be one blanket solution to the rest of the world. And no one can carry that responsibility as best as they can. But what I can do is look at what does the future look like for my people, and how do I amend the old ways with the new ways to make that future happen that acknowledges the rights of Mother Earth. I'll try my best.
Think globally, act locally.
Okay, so yeah, the cliche, think globally, act locally is very appropriate, I suppose. You know, yeah.